I discovered the terrifying secrets of an emperor's private island where innocent boys vanished. I never should have opened that door. It all started on a muggy afternoon. The kind where the air feels thick and sticky, making it hard to breathe. I was just a kid, bored and restless, wandering through the old library in my grandma's house where strange things always seemed to hang in the air like dust motes. The smell of mildew and aged paper curled around me, whispering secrets. That's when I found the book. Tattered and dusty, the spine cracked open, revealing tales of a distant island ruled by a tyrannical emperor. An island where children went missing without a trace. Curiosity tugged at me, pulling me deeper. I read about shadowy figures lurking in the palm trees and echoes of laughter that turned to screams when the sun dipped below the horizon. It sent chills down my spine. The longer I read, the more I felt the weight of emptiness pressing on my chest. The island was said to be cloaked in fog, the kind that chilled you to the bone. The local villagers avoided it like the plague. They whispered about sacrifices and the emperor's insatiable hunger for power and youth. The hairs on my arms stood on end. What had happened to those boys? Suddenly, the air shifted. An unnatural silence blanketed the library. I could hear the creaking of the floorboards like faint whispers. Shadows flickered, stretching across the walls, bending and warping, as if something was watching me. My heart raced. I glanced around, feeling the oppressive darkness close in, and felt a cold draft brush against my neck. Suddenly, out of nowhere, I heard a soft thud, then another. Is someone there? I called, my voice barely above a whisper. Nothing answered but the heavy beat of my heart. I could taste fear on my tongue, bitter and metallic. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. But the sense of being watched only grew stronger. I stood up, clenching my fists, ready to bolt, when the book slid from my hands, thumping onto the floor. I froze. The pages fluttered open, revealing a grim illustration. There it was, the chilling depiction of the emperor, his eyes dark wells of malice, a sinister grin curling on his lips. I felt a wave of nausea hit me, then I heard it again, a rustle, followed by a soft, feathery voice. I couldn't make it out, but it sounded as if it was coming from the doorway. I held my breath, tracking the movement, my pulse pounding in my ears. Shadows danced, and the air thickened with dread. I stepped backward, and that's when I saw it. A figure loomed at the threshold, tall and cloaked in shadow, its face obscured. The atmosphere crackled with tension. I couldn't move, paralyzed with fear. Who are you? A whispered breath escaped my lips, but it felt lost in the abyss of darkness. Then, everything went black, just as the door slammed shut behind me. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The darkness enveloped me, thick and suffocating, like a shroud woven from whispered secrets and unfulfilled nightmares. I was engulfed in silence, but it was the kind of silence that screamed. I felt it pressing down on me, its weight unbearable. I could barely move, my limbs frozen, anxiety pooling in the pit of my stomach. Gradually, as my eyes adjusted to the inky blackness, I noticed a faint glow emanating from the corners of the room. It flickered like candlelight, dancing just out of reach. With each pulse of light, I could see scattered dust spiraling through the air, illuminated momentarily before falling back into obscurity. Was I dreaming? Or had I slipped beyond the veil of reality, trapped in some forsaken dimension born from the pages of that cursed book? Then, the rustling began again, this time more pronounced, more insistent. It was louder, almost frantic. I strained to listen, my heart beating so hard it felt like it might burst. "Is anyone there?" My voice trembled, mirroring the rhythmic thumping of my heart. The glow intensified, casting fleeting shadows across the walls. Figures flickered at the periphery of my vision, formless yet undeniably present. I tried to summon the courage to move, to back away from that oppressive darkness, but a low, dreadful whisper slithered through my mind like a serpent. "Stay," it urged, silky and sinister. "Stay with us." Images of the boys, the innocent boys who had vanished, flashed in my mind, their frightened faces twisted in despair as if they were trapped like I was, imprisoned in this haunting abyss. The glow swelled, and the shadows began to take on shapes, morphing into familiar forms of those who had disappeared long ago. Their eyes glimmered, void of life yet full of anguish. "Help us!" one of them called, though his voice was more a ghostly echo than a plea. My chest tightened, as I struggled against the weight of their sorrow. "The Emperor wants us to join him," panic surged through me, electrifying my nerves. I turned, desperate for an exit, but the door had vanished. The walls pulsed, breathing in a sickening rhythm, and I could hear the soft patter of unseen feet. It was as if the library itself had become alive, a maze designed to trap me in its dark embrace. Suddenly, from the depths of that darkness, a figure emerged, the cloaked silhouette I had seen before. It was closer now, and with the flickering light, I could make out more details. The fabric of its cloak shimmered almost imperceptibly, as if woven from strands of despair itself. A cold, malevolent energy radiated from it, wrapping around me like icy tendrils. "Join us," it hissed, voice like splintered glass. "Your smell is sweet," so full of life. I recoiled, heart racing. It extended an elongated hand, skeletal fingers beckoning me closer. I stumbled back, my mind racing with thoughts of escape, but the shadows seemed to conspire against me. "Why? What do you want?" I begged, words spilling from trembling lips. "Flesh and blood for the throne," it whispered, and with that, the world around me twisted. I felt a tug deep in my core, as though something was pulling me, trying to drag me into the inescapable void. The terrified faces of the boys surged around me, their mouths moving in silent screams, eyes wide with terror. My own voice joined their chorus, pleading for help, desperate for a way out. Then, without warning, the shadows writhing behind the figure coalesced into a massive form, its shape horrific and grotesque. I could barely comprehend it, an amalgamation of lost souls, twisted limbs, and hungry eyes. "Feed the Emperor," it bellowed, voice reverberating through the very fabric of my being. The icy grip around my heart tightened, and as the darkness surged forward, I braced myself for the onslaught. But just as the shadows engulfed me, a bright light erupted, blinding me, and I felt myself being ripped from their grasp. In that moment of disorientation, I found myself flung back into the library, the oppressive darkness dissipating like fog under the sun. But I was not alone. The book lay open beside me, its pages fluttering with a life of their own. And there, etched in intricate script, was a line that chilled me to my core: "To break the cycle, one must be offered." As I processed the terrifying revelation, I felt a cold draft sweep through the room, accompanied by soft whispers that coiled around my ears. "Who will it be?" they questioned, laughter dripping with malice, and suddenly, from the depths of the shadows, I caught sight of a familiar fleeting figure. It was one of the boys. He stared at me with eyes dark and hollow, mouth opening in an eternal scream, a warning or a plea, I could not tell. But one thing was unmistakable: I could not escape the island or the Emperor's unending hunger. The chilling laughter crescendoed around me, a sinister music of phantoms, as I comprehended the shocking truth: someone had to be sacrificed, and the time to choose was coming fast. The shadows settled heavily around me, a suffocating blanket that seeped into every crevice of my mind. The book lay open, its pages fluttering like distressed wings, revealing ancient symbols set against a backdrop of ink that seemed to sparkle with malice. I could feel its call, an insatiable pull that threatened to bind me, body and soul, to the fate of the forgotten boys. "Who will it be?" the whispers echoed, slithering through the air like smoke. I felt their chill wrap around my spine, tightening, squeezing as my breaths quickened to a feverish pace. The boy's hollow eyes bore into me, pleading for salvation, yet all I could see reflected back was a harbinger of guilt, was not just a warning, but also a reflection of my own dread. Dread pooled around me, thick and heavy, but I was drawn to the tome, unable to resist its allure. I read the words again: to break the cycle, one must be offered. My heart thundered in my chest as I grappled with the implications. What kind of offering could possibly set them free? Or was it mere rhetoric, a cruel jest from whatever malevolent spirit had orchestrated this horror? The sinister laughter resonated, weaving through the library like a malignant vine, coiling tighter around my thoughts. I staggered backward, trembling as the room pulsated around me, shadows darting at the edges of the flickering candlelight, each flick of the flame illuminating insidious forms waiting patiently in the darkness. They pressed against the invisible walls of my sanity, groping and clawing for release. Panic surged anew, sharp and bright as I turned back to the arched window. The landscape outside was awash in a deepening twilight, unchecked storms roiling in the distance as thick clouds boiled like turbulent waters. I sensed a storm was brewing, not just in the sky beyond, but within the ghastly confines of the haunted library itself. In the growing dimness, a thud echoed, the sound of something heavy impacting against the floor, reverberating like a drumbeat of doom. My pulse quickened. My gaze darted toward the source, and to my horror, I noticed that one of the bookshelves trembled, the tomes quivering in anticipation, rattling against one another like whispered secrets eager to escape. Then, like the rising tide, they cascaded forward, spilling onto the ground in a writhing mass, pages flapping frantically as though alive. The sensation was overwhelming, a cacophony of voices melded with the oppressive ambience, drowning me in an ocean of despair. The shrieks of the lost boys echoed behind them, crying out, desperate for release. With every creak of the shelves, I felt the very air thicken with their yearning, a compelling tax on my spirit. Where were their ashes? Their souls? Had they become one with these cursed pages, forever etching their despair into the very fabric of the library itself? An abrupt stillness fell over the room, suffocatingly quiet save for the frantic whipping of the pages, now pulsing like a heartbeat eager to escape. I chanced to glance back at the boy, the hollow apparition beckoning me with a ghostly hand, pulling me closer to the grim tableau he represented. "He's one of us now," a voice purred from the shadows, the cloaked figure reappearing like a specter of death, each syllable dripping with a sinister sweetness. "This is your choice, dear reader. You can join us, or you can turn away. But know this, each choice draws you deeper into the abyss, deeper into his hunger." The sight of the boy, forever suspended in a silent scream, gripped hold of my heart, squeezing like a vice. "Don't choose me," he mouthed, but no sound escaped, only a desperate pleading filled the void around us. "Don't you dare." Before I could gather my racing thoughts, the cloaked figure swept the remaining light from the room, plunging everything into a darkness that throbbed with malevolence. Only the boy's eyes remained, reflecting an ethereal light that was both the beacon of hope and the abyss of despair. Suddenly, the ground trembled as an unseen force surged beneath us, a pulse of dark energy radiating outward. The walls began to close in, constricting, as the shadows writhed hungrily at the edges, moving like a tidal wave poised to crash. I was running out of time, running out of choices. "Choose." The dark voice commanded, echoing through the suffocating walls of despair as the shadows surged closer, and with an electrifying jolt, the air crackled with something ancient and primal, an undeniable call to the sacrifice. As the darkness converged upon me, I knew, the next moment would determine not only my fate, but the fate of the boy's tortured spirit. Could I bear the weight of what was to come? With a final shuddering breath, I made my choice, unaware of the terror that awaited, my hand reaching for the cursed book as the darkness swirled violently around us, and in that fleeting moment, everything changed. The boy's eyes widened, a horrified realization dawning as the swirling shadows echoed a terrible truth. One final offering would unlock the secrets of the island, and I had just sealed my own fate in a pact with the Emperor's insatiable hunger. Just as the darkness enveloped me again, a blood-curdling scream erupted from the boy, reverberating through the silence, and then, there was nothing. The suffocating void that followed my frantic choice felt like a solid weight, pressing down relentlessly on my chest. There was no sound, no glimmer of light in an oppressive darkness that dripped with malice, a thick fog enveloping me in its icy grip. Time lost all meaning, seconds morphed into years as I stood in the blackness, thoughts spiraling into a cacophony of dread. Then, the sound returned, an echoing whisper that snaked its way around me, coiling tightly. "You have chosen," it hissed, the voice familiar yet filled with a sinister satisfaction. "Welcome to the domain of the Emperor's desires." Before I could respond, the darkness erupted with flashes of memory, oscillating between the distant cries of despair and visceral images, faces twisted in agony, boys trapped in time, their laughter now a relic in a macabre gallery. I stumbled, feeling the air shift, charged with a pulsing energy that crackled like static electricity. Fear ignited in me anew as I felt the ancient forces at play, unseen eyes watching with anticipation. "A sacrifice," the voice chanted, and suddenly the air around me ignited. Flickering flames erupted, illuminating the spectral forms of the boys who had vanished, their faces hollow and eyes shimmering with the burning ember of lost hope. They floated just out of reach, hands extended, clawing at the air as though desperate to breach an invisible barrier separating them from deliverance. "Help us!" one of them screamed, his voice reverberating through the rising inferno. I felt a visceral urge swell within me, a compulsion to assist them to tear through the shadows that bound their souls. Yet, the voice of the cloaked figure echoed in my mind, warning, taunting, "What will you sacrifice in exchange for their freedom?" A soul must be weighed. For a fleeting moment, echoing truths flickered across my mind, fragments of lives that had once thrived beyond the cursed island. My heart hammered painfully in my chest. The book had promised power, a chance to unravel the binding curse, yet I realized too late that I had not just chosen for me, I had chosen for them. Unheeded, the shadows lunged at me, coalescing into a shape that defied description, a monstrous amalgamation of fear and desperation. Its eyes glimmered like dying stars, reflecting my deepest sorrows, the weight of my sacrifice almost visible in the air. The boys thrashed behind it, struggling against the unseen chains that anchored them to this realm. "Save us!" they pleaded, their voices a haunting symphony of pure anguish. As I fought against the chill creeping up my spine, I sensed an unfathomable sorrow intertwined with my own regret. "But who? What must I lose?" I asked, my voice trembling, barely a whisper against the overwhelming dread. The creature's maw opened in a silent scream, as though the question had pierced its very essence. A portion of me recoiled, yet part of me hungered to know, to understand the terrifying price of redemption. The air thickened, a desperate tension vibrated around me as a figure emerged from the inferno, one of the boys, his translucent form flickering like a dying flame, his heart. He cried out, his voice a chilling whisper carried upon the winds of despair. "You must offer your heart in exchange for ours." Horror flashed through me, a visceral reality that twisted in my gut. Just as I opened my mouth to object, the shadows lunged forward, encompassing me. They intertwined around my limbs, electrifying the very core of my being, making my pulse race. No! I screamed, my heart pounding with a ferocious urgency. "I won't give my heart. I won't become like you." Yet, the figure only stared back, eyes filled with a strange mixture of ache and longing. I could almost hear the soft echoes of the lives that had been stolen, their joys and fears swirling beneath the surface like turbulent waters. In that moment of heart-wrenching clarity, I understood I, too, had become ensnared. The darkness writhed, tightening its grip, and with it came a vision of the Emperor, vile and towering, a specter of unending hunger and insatiable greed. I felt his presence intrude upon my mind, surging like a dark tide, whispering promises of power and possession. "Embrace it," the ominous voice echoed. "Your heart belongs to him." And just as it threatened to consume me whole, I caught a flicker of movement behind the boy's anguish-stricken visage. An enormous shadow surged forth from the raging darkness, an entity whose spine-chilling essence made the very foundation quiver beneath me. It surrounded the other boys, who shrieked in terror, their cries abruptly silenced. I was paralyzed as the truth sank in. His was not just a choice, it was a merging of fates, a horrific acceptance of a legacy filled with eternal darkness. In that moment, everything hinged upon decisions far greater than my own, and the bitter price weighed heavily upon my heart. just then, the shadows dispersed slightly to reveal a horrific tableau. A circle of light emerged, illuminating an altar smeared crimson, the boy's anguished form suspended above it, tethered between worlds. "Only one can escape," the voice taunted, echoing in my ears. The realization hit me like a thunderbolt. I had become entangled in the web of the Emperor's dark past, a pawn in a game leading to an unthinkable sacrifice. The eyes of the boys watched, full of desperate hope, but deep within, I sensed their fear of what that hope would cost me. As the array of horrors concentrated around me, every fiber of my being screamed against the impending doom. A final, piercing scream tore through the air. The boy I had seen before, his voice filled with emotional agony as it escaped him once more. "Don't be the monster they want you to be," he whispered, just as everything began to shudder, plunging back into chaos. "The shadow seeking to ensnare me," wailed loudly, reverberating through the library like a monstrous wind, and in that moment, time fractured. Just as the altar crackled with energy, I took a step back, feeling the weight of the darkness shifting. And without a moment's hesitation, I turned to flee, knowing that the choice I made could still lead to unimaginable horrors. But the instant I crossed the threshold, I was met with the boy's final words echoing in my ears, a haunting promise I could not dismiss: "You will be back." The darkness exploded behind me, bringing the suffocating despair rushing in like a tsunami. And as the shadows swallowed me whole, I understood a choice had been made, a path forever woven into the fabric of my existence, and the true nightmare had only just begun. The world blurred around me as I stumbled into the faint glow of the library. I stood, panting, caught between the oppressive darkness that still clawed hungrily at my heels. The chilling sensation of being pursued pressed down further, suffocating like a weight upon my chest, constricting each breath. The senseless whispers lingered in the air, growing louder, morphing into a sinister chant. "You cannot escape," they taunted, a chorus of lost souls ensnared in the web of torment I unwittingly found myself part of. Glimmers of light flickered from the stained glass windows, casting grotesque shadows that danced around the shelves, the vivid hues only amplifying the dread settling deep within me. The books, once mundane, now pulsed as if alive with malice. They beckoned, daring me to uncover secrets buried beneath paternal lies. My heart raced, each beat accompanied by the pulsating echoes of the boys, "Forever tethered to this cursed place, find the others," I whispered to myself, forcing my feet to move. As I turned a corner, something fell from a darkened shelf, crashing to the ground, scattering dust and echoes throughout the empty space. I recoiled in fear as a skeletal hand emerged from the remnants of the fallen tome. It writhed, fingers clawing at the air, a visage scrambling into awareness. My instinct screamed for me to run, but the truth that loomed ahead was undeniable. The Emperor had done far more than imprison the boys. He had intertwined their souls, and mine, into a twisted fate. The optical illusion of the library warped around me, corridors lengthening and spiraling into endless shadows. Desperation fueled my search as I rummaged through the plethora of tomes, each page singing of sorrow and eternal suffering. Then, amid the chaos, I caught sight of the boy's fading face I had encountered before, a ghostly figure suspended in time, glimpses of humanity flickering within him. "Help us," he implored, eyes wide with desperation. The key suddenly, the room erupted with an unsettling laughter that echoed from all corners, shattering the fragile silence as if the very walls mocked my plight. "Searching for keys hidden in shadows will yield only pain," the phantom voice rippled with scorn, each word oozing with a dark pleasure. From one of the bookcases, a peculiar tome slapped open, revealing gilded illustrations of forlorn boys ensnared in chains. My heartbeat quickened, I felt the blood drain from my face as my eyes scanned the contents, stopping on a page depicting a ritual, sinister and grotesque. My breath hitched. The Emperor had been calling forth sacrifices, twisting the essence of innocence to obtain unholy power. "No," I murmured, realization washing over me like icy water. They had not simply vanished, they had been consumed. My stomach twisted at the thought. Suddenly, the library trembled, walls pulsing with dark energy as an ominous presence began to fill the air. The very essence of despair thickened, as if the moments of panic and hopelessness transmogrified into something tangible. Shadows poured from every crevice, faces forming within them, their mouths stretched in silent screams. I staggered back as they lunged towards me, fingers clawing at the air, the memories of lost children mingling with the darkness around me. Join us. They beckoned, their ethereal voices merging, pulling me toward them, their faces contorted in suffering. We will never be free unless you give up your place among the living, no. I shouted, recoiling from the presence that drew closer, colder than the void from before. I want. Suddenly, the air shook as a profound, malevolent voice thundered through the confines of the library. You dare defy me? The darkness swelled to monstrous proportions, coalescing into a figure pale as bone and clad in rotted finery. The emperor, a fiendish ruler distorted by centuries of greed, his index finger pointing directly at me, sealing my fate. You are no longer a mere observer, but a player in my game. The time has come for you to choose. Will you sacrifice your heart for their freedom, or will you join their eternal suffering alongside me? His voice twisted around me, promising power and pain, a tempting embrace that stirred something deep within. No. I shouted, refusing to succumb to his dark seduction. But as his laughter rippled like broken glass through the air, the shelves quivered, and suddenly, the stories within them began to leak forth, unholy truths of terror manifesting around me, a frenzied whirlwind of despair illuminating the room. Your heart, or theirs? The emperor demanded, eyes glinting with ravenous hunger. Panic surged through me as I scrambled backward toward the altar, heart pounding painfully. The spectral forms of the boys surrounded me, voices merging into a cacophony of pleas and warnings. You can't trust him. He will twist your desires into nightmares. And just as I reached out to the fading visage of the boy I recognized, an anguished scream erupted, severing the air like a Bladian innocent voice from a past that was not my own, a cry of a boy entangled in the emperor's embrace. Don't give in. The boy's words faded into an echo, barely heard above the rising tide of darkness that churned like a storm around me. Your choice decides all. At that moment, an ear-splitting crack reverberated through the chamber, and the fabric of reality began to tear like fragile parchment. What I perceived as freedom rapidly contorted into unimaginable horror, and the horrifying presence of the emperor drew closer. In that fatal moment, everything imploded into chaos. Before I could comprehend the consequences of the decision ahead, I saw their faces morphing into masks of terror, losing their faint glimmers of hope. The darkness burst forth, snatching me from the altar, and just as I felt my world shatter, something only half-formed rose from the shadows, coiling deep within the void, its hunger insatiable. The shadows enveloped me as darkness reigned supreme. I sensed a void of certainty that chilled my very soul. You have made your choice, the voice hissed, just as the ground beneath me cracked and split apart. The last echo of the boy calling my name echoed through the ruptured silence, mingling with the rising dread, resonating in a haunting memory that would forever haunt my fate. As my surroundings descended into nothingness, a wicked giggle echoed through the air, and then the abyss consumed me whole. The sensation of falling rippled through my body as the darkness tightened its hold. I felt the chill seep into my bones, a creeping dread clawing up from the depths, gnashing at my sanity. Suddenly, I hit solid ground, a jarring impact that rattled my teeth and sent sharp pain blooming through my body. Winded, I gasped for breath, my heart racing as my senses frantically re-engaged. Around me, muted colors and grotesque shapes began to emerge from the shadows, revealing a distorted landscape. I lay sprawled on what seemed like a barren expanse of lifeless earth, sepulchral fog enveloping me, swirling with soft, pitiful cries that permeated the stagnant air. Shadows clawed at the edges of my vision, whispering, beckoning me deeper into this nightmare. The sense of being relentlessly hunted returned with ferocity. I felt eyes piercing through the veil of darkness. Each breath was a battle against the raw fear clutching my throat, and in that moment, I realized I wasn't alone. Broken silhouettes moved about in the gloom, shifting like wraiths caught in a dance of despair. I strained to make sense of them, dread coiling tighter around my heart. Is anyone there? My voice tremored, lost amidst the cacophony of fading sobs and muffled laughter. The faint glow of something in the distance flickered like a beacon, a promise of escape perhaps, but an ominous warning loomed over it, a dark invitation. As I staggered towards it, the ground beneath me felt alive, pulsing with an unspeakable energy that twisted my stomach in knots. I heard the familiar, anguished voice calling out again, reverberating from the depths of the fog, "Help us! Don't leave us!" It was the boy from the library, his pleas a tether to sanity in the mire of chaos. Drawing closer, shapes began to coalesce from the mist. Each figure bore the same haunting resemblance: the lost children trapped in an eternal nightmare, their features overlapping in an unnerving amalgamation of pain and pleading. I stopped dead, fear rooting me in place as I met their hollow eyes, devoid of hope, inexplicably bound to the dark forces of this realm. Then the air shifted again, heavy with a weight I could feel pressing down upon my chest. "You cannot save them," a voice whispered, cold as ice. It was not the Emperor's, but something darker, more ancient. I turned, feeling it behind me, a dark wraith, a formless shadow with tendrils reaching out like grotesque fingers, searching for a home in my soul. "Please," I rasped, my heart pounding with terror. "What do you want from us?" "Freedom," it hissed, its voice merging with the howls of the trapped, a cacophony of agony woven into the fabric of its being. "But it is freedom wrapped in sacrifice. One must take the place of another." With that, the shadows visibly tightened around the lost children, their faces merging into an unbearable tableau of despair. Time twisted as if I were being drawn through a wormhole, the past and present converging into an uncanny vision, a mass of familiar yet foreign faces staring back at me, ripe with potential and innocence. I could feel their warmth, begging for salvation, yet ensconced in chains of my own making. The gales howled like countless voices fighting in a tempest, muddled cries ripping through the silence. "We were all chosen before you, speak our names. Set us free," they cried, spectral bodies reaching toward me, their chains clanking like a broken promise. "Your power is your burden, will you bear it?" The shadow murmured, swaying toward me, its voice insidious. It seemed to expand as I stood frozen, the atmosphere thickening with a cloying miasma that suffocated all reason. "Your heart lies within their grasp." Suddenly, I remembered the boy's fading visage from the library. That fleeting moment echoed eerily in my mind, an image of a kind, childlike innocence swallowed by unspeakable malevolence. It sent a quiver of terror racing through me, the realization dawning like a heavy veil. The choice lay before me, their liberation or my own. That I closed my eyes, but the visions wouldn't fade. Images of boys, trapped in anguished forms, blasted through my consciousness, each face a reminder of my own failures, their silent screams drowning out my thoughts. I stumbled backward, falling onto a patch of soft earth that felt warm under my touch, and strange roots began twisting and curling around my fingers. "No." I gasped. "I want decide. I want trade lives." The swirling shadows surged, furious and relentless, consuming the cries of the trapped children, their faces morphing into monstrous visages that reeked of betrayal. "You will choose," the wraiths shrieked in unison, the sound cutting through the air like a scythe. "You will choose or be devoured by your own confusion." As a chaotic swirl of despair beckoned me closer to the precipice of choice, the ground erupted around me, a churning maelstrom of limbs, voices, and shadows, clawing at my mind. "Please!" I shouted, the weight of the decision crushing down. Then my ears caught something else. A distant echo resonated through the void like the tolling of a bell. It was a name, painfully familiar. William. William. As the name curled around me, something dark writhed within the shadows, and I felt a cold breath brush against my neck. A dark presence that knew me, one that knew everything. The darkness surged, swelling around me, and with a furious roar, the wraith seemed to expand exponentially, enveloping all light and hope. The very ground beneath me shifted, reality twisted and splintered, giving way to a crack of blinding light that cut through the suffocating shadows. Moments later, as reality fractured, I heard the boy's voice one last time, a mix of terror and resolution. "Find me before it is too late." And then I was thrust into the eye of the storm, caught between choice and consequence, spiraling down into an abyss where freedom had teeth and waited with hungry intent. I landed with a thud on damp concrete, disoriented and gasping for air as the weight of the previous realm lifted momentarily, replaced by an oppressive stillness. The air was thick with the sickly sweet scent of decay, each breath tasting like ashes as I struggled to rise. I blinked, my senses reeling, trying to chart this new terror in a dark, cavernous hallway illuminated by flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed menacingly overhead. The walls of the passageways around me were slick with moisture, grotesque stains dripping in patterns that twisted into shapes so ghastly they were nearly alive. I stumbled forward, the echoes of my footsteps ringing hollow against the oppressive silence. There was an unsettling familiarity about this place, a gnawing feeling that dug into my mind like a predator honing in on its prey. That voice, the boy's voice, had dissipated into the shadows of the fog behind me, yet its echoes reverberated in my skull, urging me onward. Find me before it is too late. His desperate plea ignited a flicker of determination, laced with despair. I pressed forward against my mounting dread, hoping to discover anything that would bring clarity to the chaos enveloping this cursed isle. Around me, the darkness seemed to pulse, shifting as if it were sentient, aware of my presence. I felt eyes lingering on my back, drawn by the whisper of my heartbeat. Every fiber of my being screamed for me to turn back, to escape this wretched place, yet the thought of abandoning those trapped haunted me like the specter I now raced against time to evade. As I moved deeper into the heart of the structure, I found a door, splintered wood and rusted metal creating a barrier into the unknown. I shoved it open, the hinges groaning in protest, revealing a dimly lit room. Flickering candles cast twisted shadows that danced like phantoms on the walls, illuminating a small altar draped with tattered remnants of fabric, remnants that sent a shiver through my soaked skin. On the altar lay an assortment of aged tokens, small trinkets and photographs of those boys, including the lost children I had glimpsed before. Dread washed over me as I recognized their faces, youthful smiles frozen in time, forever encased in agony. A chill swept through the room, sending goosebumps spiraling across my arms, igniting an insatiable urge to flee, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. Drawing closer, I felt an unexpected warmth emanating from an object, a small, worn-out compass that seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm. I hesitated, then picked it up, its surface etched with names that tugged at the contours of my memory. William the First murmured, my voice barely audible, and in that moment, something in the air shifted, the flickering candles dimmed, casting elongated shadows that twisted and contorted into forms too horrific to name. The atmosphere crackled, thickening with the weight of dread, and I could hear the cries of the trapped children urging me, their torment pressing into the very fabric of the room. Whispers filled my ears, winding around my thoughts with a seductive urgency. Choose, dear friend. Choose or bear witness to their suffering. The darkness coiled tighter, layers of shadows creeping toward me from the edges of the room, choking the light, burying my courage beneath despair. I gripped the compass tighter, though its needle spun wildly, unsure of the direction it should lead me. Suddenly, the far wall of the room shuddered violently, splintering, a crack emerging that revealed the pulse of something alive, dark yet pulsating with an insatiable hunger. Then a voice, guttural and resonant, broke through. One must take the place of another. My heart raced, confusion speeding through my veins like wildfire. The shadows twisted, coalescing into the shapes of the boys, their faces twisted in silent screams, eyes hollow with unquenchable despair, their colors leaching into the blackness. They reached toward me, frail fingers stretching as though trying to grasp onto the remnants of hope. As their anguished forms rolled toward me, I caught sight of the compass once again, its trembling needle finally settling towards a single direction, pointing insistently towards the darkness spewing from the wall. I felt an ill-fated energy vibrating through me, a sickening invitation mingled with my fear. No, I gasped, raising my hands as if to ward off the endless wave of sorrow. I want choose. I refuse to abandon anyone else, but reality twisted violently, the compass shattered with a deafening crack, sending splintered shards spiraling into the void. A blinding light surged forth, consuming everything in its path, forcing me back through the tumultuous divide until I felt the cold reality of the stone floor beneath me, and there it was, in the blinding flash, the figure stood at the edge of the maelstrom, pale and gaunt, a familiar silhouette flashing with dread. Find me, before it is too late. Just then, beneath the swirling distortion of darkness, I felt the chains of lost souls thrust deep into my heart, and the weight of their suffering pressed into my very being. Panic surged through me, and as I staggered back, the shadowy figure split into two. The other half, suddenly corporeal, was a mirror image of me, grinning a dark reflection that whispered menacing truths. What is your choice? It hissed, a haunting echo laced in its tone. Your freedom awaits or theirs. The ground trembled beneath our feet, shrill laughter bursting through the air, as the room began to twist anew, spinning towards a familiar face, a friend lost in the darkness. The walls shimmered, transforming back into the children I had just seen. With time slipping away and shadows closing in, I realized the horrifying truth: there was no escaping this choice. The darkness awaited, and as I felt tendrils wrap around my ankles, pulling me toward that dark figure, the last image burned into my mind was William's terrified gaze, lost in the chaos, and then, everything went black. As the darkness engulfs me completely, I am swallowed whole by an abyss so black it feels a Livian entity that pulsates with a mind of its own. It presses against my skin, the weight like a grip, suffocating in its intensity. This is not a mere absence of light, but a sentient void that thrives on despair. I claw at its edges, desperate to unearth myself from this shadowy prison, but it is like grasping at smoke slipping through my fingers, dragging me deeper into its folds. Suddenly, vibrations surged through the ground, a low rumble resembling the distant growl of a beast awakening from a long slumber. I squeeze my eyes shut, driven by instinct, willing the crushing darkness to release me. With a sudden jolt, I open my eyes, expecting to see the flickering candles once more, yet instead, I find myself in a sprawling chamber illuminated by a sickly yellow glow. The walls are slick with moisture, much like the hallway I had just escaped, but these walls shimmer with something sinister, glimpses of faces distorted in agony trapped within the stone. I gasped, recoiling as the realization hit me: they were the lost souls, their silent screams etched in every crack and crevice. A faint sound wafted through the air, a soft sobbing, fragile like glass breaking. It pierced the thick tension in the room, drawing me toward its source despite every instinct urging me to flee. I stepped closer toward the shadows congealed in the far corner, heart hammering in my chest. "Help me please," a voice floated from the depths, raw with desperation. It was the boy, the very same I had chased through the nightmare, the one whose cries ignited my resolve. With trembling hands, I reached forward, the breath of the room curdling around me as I pushed through the dark veils. Before me stood a small stone archway, framed by vines of shadows intertwining with skeletal branches. On the other side, everything shimmered, momentarily casting away the oppressive gloom. "William!" I shouted, the name bursting from my lips as hope flickered in my chest. But as I stepped through, the glimmer faded, revealing an expanse of an endless ocean swirling with stormy gray waves that crashed violently against a jagged cliff. I stumbled back, my heart lurching as the realization dawned that this was not the sanctuary I had longed for, but a deception woven by the darkness. "Over here." The voice beckoned again, now more of a rasp, moving just beyond the mist that coiled menacingly around the cliffside. I raced toward it, frantic for any glimpse of the boy, but the landscape altered with every step. What had once felt solid now threatened to pull me under, like a tempestuous tide swirling with malice. "Don't leave me." The call, now suffused with terror, electrified the air. I pushed harder against the gale, the waves crashing with such ferocity, they mirrored the chaos in my heart. Each time I nearly grasped the fading figure, he slipped further away, entangled in the shadows that twisted around him like serpents. Just as the mist tightened around me, holding me back from breaking free, I felt a rippling force in the earth beneath my feet. Cracks splintered the land, dark tendrils reaching as if to grasp at my ankles, pulling me down toward a chasm of blackness that awaited below. I screamed, summoning every ounce of strength to resist its pull, desperation surging within me. "Choose." The familiar voice resounded me, reflection, still lurking in the recess of my mind, its unwavering gaze locking onto me. "Freedom or sacrifice?" Its whisper slithered into my thoughts, drowning out the cries of those lost. As I struggled, glimpses of faces pooled in the rushing shadows, children I once thought had vanished, each pair of eyes pleading, torment woven into their very souls, seemingly rising from the depths of despair. I staggered, feeling the ground tremble beneath me, edge eroding with each heartbeat as it enacted the choice I had so ardently fought against. "William!" I shouted, desire dawning into stubborn hope. "I will not choose between you and them." But the words came out as nothing more than a whisper. Lost to the howling winds that tore through the hollow chamber, fraying my resolve, and then, amidst the darkness, a figure surged forth, an effigy silhouetted against the storm. It was William, his face alight with unnatural anguish, reaching out as the maw of despair loomed behind him. The air vibrated with tension, a mad crescendo of wailing rising like a choir from the depths of tragedy. He was so close. I could feel the warmth of his presence. But before I could grasp him, an icy hand latched onto my wrist from the shadows. Pain flared through me, filling the void where hope had thrived just moments before. My body held hostage by the clawing darkness, I felt myself being dragged back, the cries of the children echoing through every fiber of my bayna cacophony that demanded to be heard, yet I teetered on the brink of silence. Choose. My reflection screamed, the laughter rising again, intertwining with the cacophony of lost souls surrounding me, as chaos descended upon my consciousness, and as I looked down at the gaping chasm, terror paralyzing me, the hand tightened around my wrist, pulling me inexorably towards the brink. With despair swirling around me like a tempest, I was forced to confront a fate worse than death. As the darkness swallowed me whole, all that remained was a single piercing scream, lost to the void. As the pitch-black void engulfed my senses, I could feel the slithery cold of its tendrils creeping across my skin, pumping fear into my veins. Even in that ephemeral moment where reality seemed to fade away, I was aware that I hadn't merely been absorbed into the shadows, I had been transported into something far more sinister and ominous. The screams, yes, they had transformed into a discordant symphony echoing around me, a pastiche of voices that resonated from the stone walls, suffocating the air with despair. Suddenly, the darkness surged, reshaping the very landscape into grotesque forms that made me question what was real. The walls around me pulsed, a grotesque heart made from tortured souls thrumming with an eerie rhythm. William, I croaked, the name barely escaping my lips as if it had become a sacrilege in this realm of anguish. I wasn't just loud in my desperation, I was desperate to be heard, to break through the maze that encased me, and then, emerging from the throbbing darkness, something twisted and crawling came to life. Shadows curled into menacing shapes, undulating in the murky dimness like a grotesque dance. My heart raced wildly, they were not mere shadows but manifestations of fear. I could see them in hallowed forms, twisting limbs and hollow eyes that glowed with an insatiable hunger. They lurked, writhing just beyond my gaze, tugging at the edges of my sanity. I began to run, stumbling in and out of distorted places, a library crammed with time-worn books that whispered secrets, a suffocating living room with walls adorned by sentient portraits whose eyes followed my every move. The sounds intensified, a cacophony of cries rising around me, suffocating in their urgency. Every pulse of the abyss felt like it was anchoring me to this twisted nightmare. In my frantic flight, a door materialized ahead, splintered and looming like a gaping maw, inviting me in with its malevolent glow. I flung it open and stumbled through, crashing onto a barren expanse cluttered with discarded memories. The air was thick with dread, an oil-slicked fog draping over the landscape of smashed photographs and forgotten toys, the remnants of the innocent lives previously entangled in this dread. William! I shouted, despair consuming me as I searched through the wreckage of souls. A vague shape stirred in the distance, something half buried beneath rotten leaves. Half a heartbeat of hope flickered within me, but dread rooted me to the spot. This could just as easily be a figment of my unraveling mind. Hesitation pulsed through my veins, reminding me that I was alone in this horrific birth of lost innocence. As I took a step toward the shape, the ground shuddered, towering walls of shadow collapsing together, contorting into a throne over which something unfathomable loomed. A face emerged, stretched and distorted, features melding into a specter of cruelty, one I dared not recognize. It opened its mouth, and voices poured for the multitude of the damned who had come before me. Help us! They linger here forever. The air crackled with mounting terror as I recalled the children's faces I didn't want to see again. William lay crumbled amongst them, his form now motionless, lost. I dropped to my knees, chaos spiraling around me as the memories of their innocent laughter echoed, hijacked by a sinister cackle that reverberated through the void. Make a choice, it bellowed, the darkness around me pulsating in a grotesque rhythm. Each beat reverberated through the air with an intensity that resonated in my bones, driving home the horror that I had to decide who would remain, who would fade into the shadows forever. No. I screamed, panic clawing at my throat. I won't choose. I refuse. But as I shouted, tendrils of inky blackness surged toward me, twisting and forming into monstrous hands, pale and skeletal fingers that clutched at my throat, squeezing tighter with each fragmented plea I offered into the void. Behind me, I could hear whispers rise, beckoning me back to the darkness. They never came for you, will not come for you. It clawed at my mind, tearing apart pieces of my sanity, leaving behind nothing but fragments. But then, through the suffocating fear, I heard it, an echo of my name, soft yet piercing, ghostly yet determined beneath the cacophony. My heart quaked. Help us! An echoing chorus surged in response, rising with an intensity that throat-latching hand couldn't smother. William! I cried, grasping for any thread of hope. Suddenly, the ground beneath me trembled with renewed ferocity as the shadows rained into an ocean of despair, threatening to swallow us all once more. In that moment, the silhouettes began to swarm around me, blurring the boundary between salvation and damnation, and whether they were saviors or demons remained agonizingly unclear. Then, as the shrieks of the tortured began rising to a deafening crescendo, everything imploded into darkness, and the world quaked around me. The pain in my chest deepened, the shadows pulling tighter, trapping me in a vice as my vision blurred. Then, finally, came the strangled words against the suffocation of sound: you must choose or be lost forever. With that chilling proclamation ringing in my ears, I felt something shift, something inside me breaking. A decision demanded, but what would be the cost? And then everything burst into blinding light, and for a moment, I could see them, the children, their faces disfigured, reaching out towards me, and beyond, the void forging grotesque shapes that promised release or eternal torment. In that split second, I stood teetering on the precipice of choice, shadows wailing behind me, and before I could wrestle with my decision, the ground roared, and the cliff began to crumble underfoot. It was a choice, yes, but I could hardly comprehend it as screaming darkness closed in, swallowing me whole. As the darkness cascaded into oblivion, I found myself suspended in a void thicker than this realm. Tangled thoughts propelled me through an endless abyss, disjointed memories swirling in the suffocating silence. Whispers of lost boys echoed through the haze, their voices drawn to me like moths to a flame. Help us, save us became the mantra of my torment, a tidal wave of despair crashing over me, threatening to drown every ounce of hope I clung to. But then, an all-consuming light emerged, a beacon amidst the choking despair. It bore the shape of familiar faces, blurred yet intimate, eyes wide with longing and fear. It was William, standing at the edge of the brightness, a haunting aura surrounding his existence. You need to choose, he murmured, his voice strained, echoing through the darkness as he reached desperately toward me. Choose? I gasped, bewildered. Choose what? The light pulsed feverishly, flickering as if caught in a fierce battle between salvation and annihilation. Shadows chased it, vying for dominance, clawing at the very essence of whatever lay beyond. With every surge of the light, the pleading faces twisted deeper into anguish, a grisly reminder of what awaited if I refused, your heart or theirs. The untamed voice of the darkness rang out, wrapping around my consciousness as it slithered through the cracks of my doubt. I felt the agonizing weight of their fear, the relentless pulse of their paina melodic symphony sinking into my very core. Give in, and they may find solace, but at what cost? Suddenly, the scenes shifted. I stood before the altar once more, a morbid tableau of choices cloaked in horror, duality of sacrifice that ignited the very fabric of my being. I could see the children, the boys I had glimpsed from the depths, watching with hollow eyes, each face representing fragments of unrealized lives. Their mouths moved silently, and yet I could hear their cries, a cacophony reverberating through that dark entity behind me. Then, it hit me, I was not just a passive observer anymore. I was an integral thread in the spinning web of fate. The whims of the Emperor and, perhaps, my own heart had woven my path through horror, and now it demanded I choose. William. I can't choose. I cried out, panic swelling in my chest as I felt the shadows hesitate. But the laughter, deep and sinister, echoed around me. Yet you must, dear child. Their freedom hangs in the balance, and your choice will seal their fate and yours. As the specter of dread coiled tighter around my spirit, images flooded through my mind, scenes once lifelike now stretching into harrowing nightmares, boys laughing, running freely on the shores of the cursed island, faces illuminated by sunlight suddenly fading to tide pools of despair. "Don't leave us," echoed William's voice, each word clawing its way toward me through the chaos. "Your heart," the darkness hissed. "What will you give to save them?" In that pulsating moment of clarity, my body ached with the knowledge that I could not save them without sacrificing a piece of myself, a morsel of my very essence. The weight of that truth pressed down on me like lead, wrapping around my chest, and I suddenly realized what must be sacrificed. My heart trembled at the thought. As shadows rippled, melded, and roared around me, pain lanced through my chest, reminding me that courage does not always come heralded by a triumphant cry but often wrapped in terrified whispers of acceptance. With the cries of the lost all around me, desperation clutched at every fiber of my being. One last chance lingered in the air, the opportunity to give them a sliver of life in exchange for my OWN. In the end, I whispered, torn between longing and fear, "Is it worth it if I lose myself?" "Choose," boomed the Emperor's voice from the depths of blackness. The shadows thickened, a surge of darkness around my feet, curling up my legs, urging me toward the void. My breath quickened as I felt the interwoven lives of the other boys pressing in upon me, and slowly, I beckoned forth the strength buried beneath my fear. I closed my eyes, feeling both the weight of their loss and the flickering hope ignited by their innocence, the echoes curling around me and tightening in a sweet embrace. "William the First, choose you," I choked out, feeling the words curl around my tongue like sweet poison. "I offer my heart so that you and the others may be free," and with that sworn promise, the world erupted in brilliant light, blindingly white as the shadows screamed their fury. I felt an excruciating pull within my chest, a ripping sensation as something uncoiled from the core of my being, the essence of my heart torn away to bind with theirs. The shadows dissolved into a maelstrom of anguish, caught between sorrow and rage, and in that agonizing embrace, the boys' faces began to emerge one by one from the darkness, vicissitudes of hope shining dimly in their eyes. Yet, as they broke free, I felt myself shattering, bits of my essence slowly unraveling into the void, as a chilling realization dawned. They were free, yes, but I had signed my soul into a deeper darkness, a realm beyond the reach of light, where I would eternally linger as a wisp of their memory, a mere shadow in the light. And with the last vestiges of my heart fading away into the ether, I felt the familiar sensation of despair engulf me yet again. Was it truly over, as echoes of their laughter, their freedom, intertwined with my sorrow? One chilling truth lingered in the veils of my fading awareness, a promise uttered in the dark resounded through me: "You will pay, for darkness always returns." And then, in one final twisted laugh that echoed through the darkness, I realized I was not just a wisp in the shadows, I had become a vessel of the Emperor's insatiable hunger. The cycle was set to begin anew, and as I drifted into obscurity, an acrid whisper flickered like candlelight in the void, dark and triumphant, "And the next sacrifice awaits."